this part of England. So I think, Mayor, without further ado, I'll pause there and see if any colleagues want to make any comments on what is a fairly extensive document. We've done a thorough review. We've included external parties far and wide to get to the policy document that we wish you to endorse as part of the wider region's strategic economic framework, with further details to come on the specific programmes and activities, and of course, what sort of funding requests might be required to deliver them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roger. And it's a really important document because this is about innovation, it's about digital expertise, about new thinking. And as you mentioned, particularly exports, where are the new opportunities, and building capacity in businesses. So it's really, really valuable and will help our thinking when we come to the debates around where money goes and where we should spend and prioritise our funding stream. So I would like to open it up to the floor if there are any conversations. One second, Daniel.
I was just going to say we've got the live stream back now. We are live. If that's all right, I can stop it again if that would be preferred.
No, please just continue. That's fine.
Will.
Thank you. So any questions on the productivity plan? Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, lovely. So obviously really welcome the report, but I think, productivity, and it says it on the first page, which I think is helpful. It's not an end within itself, is it? And obviously productivity is about making the most money out of the fewest number of workers, which obviously in a world which is changing fast and where health inequalities have been writ large over the last 18 months, I'm very interested in getting more people, more jobs. So I notice your plan on the page, which is really helpful, actually. It talks about higher levels of good work. But how do you expand the number of people in employment? So obviously, to grow the economy, I suppose. It's that triple bottom line, isn't it? And what else should we be doing, given what we now know, to make sure it's not just productivity as an end within itself?
Thank you, Councillor Hinchcliffe. A good question. I hope within the content of the plan on the page, there are elements of the ingredients for this, and it is not an end in itself, actually. It's part of the journey to the ultimate end, which is a better economy, but actually provide better jobs, but also better lives. One of the things we've learned as a result of the pandemic, and it's in our DNA, it's an opportunity to reimagine our economy. It's an opportunity to put resilience into it, but not to throw everything away, also to improve the existing business stock. And I think one of the things that came out of the surveys, which I'm well aware of because of my own background, but hadn't realized was perhaps as challenging as it appears to be, is the underlying quality of management and their ability to grow businesses beyond it being just okay for them as owners, and broadly okay for the employee group, rather than actually continuing to strive for something greater, number one. Number two, I think as the combined authorities are aware, and most members around the table, we see the opportunity to become much more innovation driven. We have the highest concentration of universities in our region outside of London South East. And as a country, we're very good with the R bit of R&D, but we're not as good with the D bit, which is the development and delivery, and hence the work we've been doing with MIT over the last few years to bring forward programs and activity that encourage and enthuse people to think about how they either innovate their existing business or businesses, or if they've got good ideas, how do we bring them and scale them to globally significant? And by being globally significant, by implication, their products, ideas, services will be exported. And the linkage with exports is actually very important. I'm pleased to say that whilst exports have slowed down for the country as a whole, West Yorkshire hasn't had as much of an effect. It hasn't been as marked effect in West Yorkshire, but there's still that enormous prize. And as I've said, if you look at the challenges that we face, as well as the opportunities, and the fact that people looking to us to lead the way on some of these trade and inward investment opportunities for us, I feel encouraged by the fact that we have the right framework. The devil will be in the actual programs and how much we're able to allocate them and what we expect them to deliver from a wide range of businesses currently in West Yorkshire. I know that's a rather fuller answer. Hopefully it partly answers what you want, if not fully. But it is a very detailed and complex project, particularly with a region where 95% of our business stock are established SMEs rather than perhaps otherwise.
So Hinchcliffe.
Yeah, I think it's just something for us to be mindful of, isn't it, as a combined authority, that the widest number of people benefit from improvements made in the economy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want us to become super efficient and that very few people benefit from that. I think the mark of a good, healthy economy is when people feel their lives are getting better and that they're able to afford more for themselves and their families, and that should be what our objective is. And productivity is a tool to getting there, but there's wider implications that we need to be aware of, I think, and all the funding we put in needs to achieve that.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Hinchcliffe, and it's also links with, so it's not separate from all of our collective activities over recent years around improving the attractiveness of this region, both nationally and internationally, to bring forward those high value jobs, but also broaden the employment base, as well as the opportunities for some of the current people working in the business community to up their skills and thereby up their standard and quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. So partly as well is trying to understand where the challenges are so that business owners and leaders can take those opportunities we're offering to help their workforce and then to increase their workforce, potentially to expand and to have greater ambitions. But there is no more greater champion for jobs than yourself, Councillor Hinchcliffe. So we will take that on board. Thank you so much. Are we as a combined authority? Oh, I'm so sorry. Councillor Poulsen.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just want to say we really welcome this plan, particularly the work on the exports. I think it is a very big world out there, and I think our businesses deserve to grasp all the opportunities available to them. Just obviously as it develops, I think paragraph 2.13, obviously then there will be a prioritisation plan, and you mentioned then looking at funding, etc., coming forward. Just as that work progresses, to make sure there are some milestones put into it, particularly when we start talking of funding, so we can see, what good looks like and that we do achieve that as part of this process and the plan being put into place. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And of course, we do have a benchmark from the Local Growth Fund performance to at least set our horizons, not limit them to that historic performance, but at least go beyond it. I think the challenge, and let's not shy away from it, we do have this huge variety in the size and shape of businesses in our region, but we do have a long tail of low productivity businesses. So we need to tackle almost both ends of the tube at once, create the new opportunities, the retraining, but also perhaps improve as much as we can the existing business stock, so we get the win-win rather than perhaps substitution, which is the thing I hope we can avoid. But absolutely, we will be coming forward with the detailed programs for colleagues to consider.
Thank you for that. Also, it was really interesting the other day when Sir Roger was telling me about Mexico being a new area for opportunity. So just for local businesses, if there are ideas for Mexican products that could be sold in Mexico, very interesting.
Thank you, Chair. If colleagues will allow me, having been privileged to be part of one of the DIT's trade advisory groups, the so-called TAG groups on investment, I've actually learned quite a lot about what's been going on post-Brexit. And as a country, we are looking to accede to something called CPTPP, which is the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's a sort of EU of Asia, South America and other parts. I hadn't heard anything about it, and I've got to do it deliberately, otherwise I get my P's and my T's all mixed up. But what I have learned, and as a region, we've tended over the last decade to look eastwards in one way or other, Europe, Middle East, further east, as opportunities for growth. But actually there's quite a lot west. Obviously, the US is still the biggest, inward investor in the UK, but below the US, thinking about the places north of South America, in South America, etc. And what struck me, and as the mayor's already mentioned, that the OECD's view is that within a generation, Mexico is likely to be the 10th largest economy in the world as compared to where it is now. So I think to myself, tactically, but importantly strategically, rather than everybody else looking east, and we'll still do that, but maybe we should go where everybody else isn't going and be ready for those opportunities in financial services, fintech, health technologies, etc. And the final point, interestingly for colleagues, hopefully, and informative, is that the area covered currently by CPTPP, before we exceed, includes 2/3 of the world's middle class, which I guess we want, forget that phraseology, but we want everybody to have those economic opportunities to enjoy good lives. So go where, in my world, and forgive the phraseology, follow the money, as it were, and it's about seeing the opportunities a decade out from now rather than just tomorrow or the week after. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again for this valuable piece of work that will really help our thinking. And can I thank Councillor Paulson as well for her support for this piece of work, and Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Just a quick question, you might not know the answer to this, Sir Roger, but when the OECD was saying that Mexico is going to be the 10th largest economy in a generation, what did they say the UK is going to be?
I'm not sure it says that we're still in the top 10, but I think part of what we've all been doing is an opportunity for us to maintain our position within that. But there are some of these economies are growing so quickly, and the skill base is started from zero in terms of not having to retrain. They're training from the first time, and I saw this firsthand, as others did, in China when I was there a few years ago. But that's not a reason for us to give up or to be complacent, but actually to be confident that actually this country as a whole, it was the trading nation of the world, and some cities in this region were part of that. So it's about how do we do it again rather than how do we do it at all, would be my response. So I feel very confident about our future, but not at all complacent about the size and shape and of the challenge, and the fact that this isn't overnight. This is not switching lights on or off. This is a long-term project that we've been on for some years, as you know, Councillor Hinchcliffe, and we need to maintain our momentum but again, further develop, and I said importantly, around the trade side of trade and inward investment and exports is crucial in my mind.
Thank you, and thank you for that very interesting debate. I've learned a lot already. So can the Combined Authority endorse the publication of the priorities and indicative actions of the plan as part of the region's strategic economic framework? All happy? Thank you so much. Moving on to item 6. So this leaves Sir Roger time to go to his important meeting if needs be, and it is the economic recovery, and Liz will be leading on this. This item asks the Combined Authority to consider and comment on the refresh of our West Yorkshire Economic Recovery Plan that was produced in collaboration with the Economic Recovery Board, made with many partners across our region. The refreshed draft plan is focused on how we can deliver a fair, just and lasting recovery for West Yorkshire across our towns, cities and rural communities. We'll also continue to make sure this plan responds to the impact on the economy, particularly as we come to the end of furlough at the end of September. And of course, the £20 cut to universal credit, as that hits the pockets of working families across West Yorkshire at the beginning of October. We know 1/3 of children in West Yorkshire are living in households that would be defined as living in poverty. And we know that the cut to the uplift on universal credit is only going to make that situation worse. And the report for this item includes an update on the business and employment and skills support being delivered as part of our collective response to COVID, and the business productivity and resilience plan connected to our recovery work. So this economic recovery plan has been refreshed at a key moment as we emerge from lockdown restrictions and towards the end of furlough, moving away from a phase of rescue to be more focused on rebuilding, reimagining and resilience of the economy. And this refreshed plan retains much of the great collaborative work of our first 2 versions. Let's not forget, we've had a number of versions of this in the past. Now we're hoping that we can really build on our experience in looking at those plans, and in particular, the central role and goal of inclusive growth and tackling the climate emergency. So we've developed it further, and new action areas linked to delivery of my manifesto pledges, focusing on delivering regionally to implement the plan, obviously within our available resources. Let's not forget, we are waiting to see what resources the spending review, October the 27th, will bring. I hope that it will bring details of our role in delivering the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, for one example, which I hope will give us the freedom to decide locally how best to support our economy, living up to the promises of devolution. A smaller targeted focus on areas where government or other public sector, private sector co-investment opportunities exist, particularly on infrastructure, where we can work with others, linked to support for quality jobs and skills. So can I just say thank you so much to everybody who contributed to this draft plan, and members of the Economic Recovery Board, leaders and officers across the 5 local authorities who've helped shape this draft. And also take this opportunity to respond to the letter about rural communities sent by Councillor Lawson and Councillor Galton. I'm able to speak to them. They're not in this meeting today, so very happy to speak to them out of this committee meeting, but to reassure them that the plan does commit to ensuring a sustainable, lasting, inclusive recovery for all parts of West Yorkshire, including our vitally important rural communities. And I'll go into more detail with them in a moment when they are free. So if we could go to looking at this plan, I wonder if Liz would like to talk us through this.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you've set out, this plan is a refresh of what we've had before, but really tries to build on some of the great evidence that the various teams have contributed. It's always difficult trying to predict and forecast the future, but the paper starts to set out some of where the evidence is around that. And it's obviously something that we would want to continue to keep up to date. And one of the questions I think around this plan is how we're going to monitor it. And obviously we think many of the things in here are part of our economic reporting and will continue to be so that we can understand how the economy is changing over the next few months in particular. So as already set out, the plan takes us through the various priority areas. Up front though, it's really hopefully clear, but again, happy to take comments on this, about the link to local plans, because this is not trying to duplicate what local districts are already doing. And there's links in the document to the local recovery plans. And so this document is trying to build a West Yorkshire picture. And I'm really very grateful for officers within each of the districts who've worked and contributed to this plan, to try and make sure that it does cover the region sufficiently. So there's quite a lot of detail in the plans. I won't go through all of it in particular. I think the forecasting work is quite important for us to understand, particularly the factors on page 18 of the pack around what could affect recovery. And these are things that we want to kind of keep an eye on as the following months. And as also mentioned by the Mayor, the clear, hopefully, role of inclusive growth and carbon throughout the plan is something that we've wanted to maintain, whilst also building in the pledges. So if it's all right, Mayor, I wasn't going to say too much more because the paper's there on the detail, and happy to take questions on it.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to reiterate my thanks as well. This is a big, important piece of work. So thank you to all the officers across the region that helped us deliver this. Any thoughts on this plan? Yes, Councillor Poulsen and then Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yes, thank you. I think under 2.6, it's very welcome that the engagement, particularly with BAME communities and disabled young people, is excellent. I mean, we're hitting 220% and 188%, which is really, really welcome. The final point in that paragraph, obviously after the engagement with these people, only 59% have a successful outcome. I don't know if there's any more feedback on what the issues are there. Are there any other factors that we need to target to actually make sure once we engage with the people, which is often the hardest bit, the initial engagement, why we're not getting a higher outcome? And just quickly on the 1,000 well-paid jobs for young people, what is the combined authority doing ourselves to take on some of these 1,000 people? Where are we up to with our apprenticeships, our graduate recruitment, and with our partners that obviously we can work with across councils, etc. Because I think we should be setting the scene for other businesses in that respect. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I wonder if Brian would like to take the first point.
Yeah, if I may, just in terms of 2.6, the number of participants starting a programme and the conversion rate into full-time and permanent jobs or education, the cohort of individuals that we're working with are many of them are 6 months plus unemployed and disadvantaged. Some particular challenges in placing them in work or training. There will be some external benchmarks that we can look at to see the whether 60%, 59% is a good target, is a successful outcome, or whether we need to do better on that. And I'm happy to report on that at the next meeting. Your second question around apprentices and the combined authority, we've currently got 19 apprentices in the combined authority with another 6 planned. And one of the things that we need to focus on is attracting a more diverse workforce, particularly from the BAME community. So we'll be looking at opportunities to recruit staff through careers fairs, working with people like Leeds City College Group and others who've got a high proportion of BAME students to attract a more diverse workforce into the combined authority.
Councillor Hinchcliffe. Thank you, Brian.
Yes, it's good to see that Bradford politicians are on the same page when it comes to inclusive growth. So obviously, just to back up what Councillor Paulson said there about very important for Bradford that this plan reflects inclusive growth and includes all communities. And sometimes that means setting targets over and even stretching targets over and above what is the proportionate representation in the general community, because actually we've got to push back, we've got to rebalance society because it's not at the moment an equal place for people to succeed, and therefore anything we can do to strengthen inclusive growth I really welcome, which I think comes to also welcome the place-based initiatives that we've each got in our 5 authorities being a big part of this. Because I think this is obviously very thematic, but the where it happens is hugely significant for rebalancing the economy in West Yorkshire and having our own objective of levelling up, if you like. I think it's also worth noting, of course, that when we first did this plan, we had a price tag of 1.4 billion ask of government, and we've not seen a penny of that for the combined authority. So for us to make the massive shifts we need to do in this West Yorkshire economy and make it good for everybody who works here and lives here, then we do need government to invest in the north. We've been worst hit with the pandemic in the north, and we need to see the investment that follows that now, because we cannot unlearn the lessons of the pandemic and the health inequalities that came writ large through that. So plead to government really to back us.
Thank you. And certainly everybody will have seen the reports. I think it was only yesterday that the north has been severely impacted, more than most regions, because of COVID, more deaths, more unemployment, and so on. So this is really important for us to set that direction of travel. Of course, there are moving parts to this, the spending review, etc. But we have our own obligations to level up within West Yorkshire, and it's not something that I will shirk from. Sir Roger.
Thank you. And as with many others around the table and beyond, I've had the privilege of being involved in this from the time when we were thinking about what recovery could look like, rather than perhaps being in the beginning stages of it. And I wonder optically, whether, and I say this because I've thought quite a lot about it, whether it's time we perhaps reflected and called it our West Yorkshire Economic Growth Plan, that obviously has recovery, reimagining and resilience in it. It's an optical thing, but it feels to me like it's more progressive and forward looking. As I say, I'm not trying to be semantic, but I just feel that perhaps we know where we've come from, and this should be about where we're going, rather than perhaps keep reminding us where we come from. As I say, I make no criticism or complaint. It's just an optical point, hopefully, that will be more broad, more positive when received in a wider audience. Just a thought.
That's something we could definitely take away as it does place it in the future, potentially. So it would be interesting to hear other people's thoughts. Has anybody got a thought immediately, or should we take it away? Councillor Hinchcliffe.
I mean, I can see the positives of that, in that we obviously want to sell ourselves as a positive place in the region. But what I wouldn't want to lose sight of is that the economy is not bouncing back for everybody. And therefore, we do have an obligation to make sure that sections of society who've been very badly hit do have support to recover. And I won't want to wipe out the lessons of the last 18 months. So as you say, Mayor, perhaps we can take away and think about that. But I can understand where Roger's coming from in terms of showing ourselves off to the world as a place for investment, which is obviously very important in a positive way.
Thank you. Any further thoughts? Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Kirklees, we support this recovery plan. We think it's timely, and the proposals to refresh and integrate with the mayoral's pledges is an excellent idea. But there's one item that I've been asked to bring up. It was the reboot programme, and it's cited on paragraph 2.8. It's the delivery through the West Yorkshire Consortium of Colleges. There's been little traction here in Kirklees to date, and we need to see a more expanded programme to meet the needs of all the local unemployed and furloughed staff. And to do this more effectively, we need to look at that.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Liz, are you happy to come in on this?
Thanks. I think it might have been
Apologies, Brian.
Brian, if
Apologies.
that's okay.
Still trying to understand who does what. Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Reboot 2 is a programme that's funded through Gainshare, which has more flexibility with regards to the qualifications that can be supported. So it's much more led by employer needs. So there's much greater flexibility on that, but happy to provide more detail outside the meeting if that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any further thoughts on the recovery plan? And welcome to Councillor Galton joining the meeting. Welcome. No further thoughts. So are we happy to note the update on COVID-19 support in West Yorkshire? Yeah, thank you so much. And if there's any further comments on this refreshed draft, the West Yorkshire Economic Recovery Plan, please do provide them outside the meeting. And are we happy to agree to review this further at future meetings as the economy develops? We are. Very good. Thank you so much. Very well. So let's move on to item 7, which is the capital spending and project approvals. This report provides details of schemes recommended to the CA for progression through the assurance process. And I'd like to invite Melanie Corcoran, Director of Delivery, to outline the proposals for capital spending and approvals under the new thematic committee structure and each of the 4 schemes for consideration. But before doing so, can I remind members what I flagged up at the beginning of the meeting? If you want to discuss the content of exempt appendix 5 to this item, then we must end the live stream and ask the press and public to leave the room. So Melanie, if you want to talk us through it, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. So the first part of the report sets out the proposed approval route for schemes that are in our funding programmes, and it shows how these have been allocated to the new thematic committees. So if that proposal is agreed today, then that will take effect from today moving forward to future committees. And we have 4 schemes for consideration here today that are recommended for approval. The first of those is York Northern Outer Ring Road, and this is a change request. So we have an existing scheme in our transport fund where the proposal is to improve 7 roundabouts and junctions along the route and look at better connected active travel, so walking and cycling routes along that route as well. City of York Council have been successful in securing further DFT funding through the MRN route to dual part of that route. Now, it's not exactly the same route, but the majority of the works will be along the same stretch of road. So the change request here is to actually bring those 2 schemes formally together in one programme so that we can do a joint design and then we can do joint construction on the 2 elements of it and bring that together formally as one single project. Would you like to pause at that point, Meryl? Would you like me to continue just briefly through each of them?
I wonder if there are any comments on that? Yes, would you like to come in? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important to recognise joining up the roundabout improvements with the dualling, because I think the public do expect us to work in a way that makes best use of resource. But this scheme is about improving the orbital cycle routes. At the moment, they're challenging, shall I just say, as a cyclist, that this would create a very distinct cycle route, which would be enjoyable for families to use, but also would connect the different communities on the outer ring road. But it also enables the release of road space within the outer ring road for bus prioritisation, for cycle and active travel. So whilst I'm not going to blame the Romans, they did create some walls in particular locations that make the inner ring road quite challenging. So that's why these are all linked. I did attend the Tackling the Climate Emergency Roadmap and Action Plan session on the 5th of August, and there were a number of issues raised there. I'm conscious that whenever road issues are discussed, we do need to take it in the context of this is about reducing carbon. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Councillor Waller. And as somebody who's a cyclist as well, we need to get it right. And York is such a beautiful place that also we need to make sure that those heritage spots are also kept clear as well. Thank you so much. Are we all happy? Oh, it's Councillor Paulson.
Yeah, just on a couple of the schemes. This is one I've been asked to raise, and it's not one I particularly know because it is a lead scheme.
Sorry, Councillor Paulson. We're going through them one by one. Do you want to save your comments for when we speak about that, and we can just get approvals going forward? Does that make sense that it's individual approvals rather than put them all in a bucket? Yeah. Okay. So let's do that. So the York Northern Outer Ring Road. Are we happy and content to let this progress through the assurance process and approve funding? We are. Very good. Right, moving on. Melanie.
Thank you, Mayor. The second scheme is it's Department for Transport Capability Fund, and we have been successful in securing grant to promote and enable people to walk and cycle across our region. So it is looking at behaviour change activity. It is supporting the promotion of active travel through small grants. And we're also completing the development of the walking and cycling implementation plans across each of our 5 local authority areas as well. So we've secured 1.35 million from DFT, and the approval or the recommendation here is to approve that we move into delivery now with this programme, now that we've had that confirmation that the funding is in place.
Thank you. Melanie, what's the criteria for councils and organisations to apply for that money?
It's small scale grants. We do have criteria set out. Obviously, it's things like promoting, bike stands in workplaces or at schools or colleges. So we do have criteria for that that we can share around with the committee if they would be interested in more detail.
Great, because then they can amplify amongst their own organisations. Excellent. So are we happy to let the Department of Transport Capability Fund revenue go through progression to the assurance process and approve the funding? I mean, the money has actually come from government, so very pleased to get that. Okay, moving on, Melanie.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the third scheme is part of our Enterprise Zone programme, and this is work at Langthwaite Business Park. It's the extension to that business park, and the Combined Authority own the site and the land that's part of this spatial priority area. And it's part of the Getting Building Fund programme. The first phase of the works will be to extend Onward Way, which is the existing route to the edge of the site, to extend that access road into the site so that we can then do second phase work, which would allow us to remediate the site. So this phase one is absolutely critical to us being able to gain access to do work on the land that we have purchased. So we're working with Wakefield Council, who will deliver phase one of the works, and then we will lead on phase two of the works. It is time limited, the funding, so that there is a time scale to spend this before March 22. But the first phase is due to start imminently and should be completed by Christmas. And that is the consideration today, that we move into delivery on that first phase and extend the access road on that critical site.
Thank you. And certainly in an area like South Kirby, this sort of development is part of our inclusive growth approach, isn't it? And those sustainable green jobs that can come out of projects like this, hopefully moving forward. Are we happy to approve? Very happy. Thank you so much. Moving on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The fourth project is the Wellington House accommodation project. This is a change request, and this is the item that has the exempt appendix.
Thank you. Would anybody want to discuss this at the end of the meeting, the appendix? Councillor Galton. So let's leave that till the end of the meeting. Yeah. Okay. So moving on, Melanie.
And the final point, just for members to note, that additionally there are 8 schemes that have been approved through delegation from the Combined Authority to the Managing Director. So I won't go, these are just for noting, so I won't go into any more detail, but we've got a safety accessibility efficiency programme on the bus network. We've got a TCF scheme at Kirklees, Dewsbury, well, 2 schemes, Dewsbury Rail Station and Huddersfield Better Connected. We've got the Land Release Fund. We've got 2 SIP schemes, which is the corridor improvement schemes in Calderdale, integrated corporate systems. We've got a rail accessibility package, and also the Leeds City Centre Greater Green. So all of these have been through a committee previously, and they had a delegation for their final approval to come through to the Managing Director.
Thank you. And Councillor Poulsen.
I'm on the right one now. Just on the Leeds City Centre Greater Green scheme, it looks like it's gone up 3-fold. Is there any particular reason for such a jump in the costings on that one?
Melanie.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The overall package and the overall works here haven't increased in cost, but there's 4 elements of works here, and they're all moving at slightly different speeds with different funding packages. And what we're trying to do is maximise the grant funding that is time limited. So we're actually moving some grant funding from one element to another element, so that we can make sure that we spend the grant before March 22. And there are actually a couple of these elements here, the Sovereign Street Bridge and the Crown Point improvements, that may well go on beyond March 22. So the match funding that we've secured overall will fund those elements of the programme that will now go beyond the grant funding timeline. But there isn't an increase in cost. We're just maximising the grants and moving the funding packages around to enable us to deliver that and get maximum benefit from the grants.
What's been deeply frustrating is these incredibly tight deadlines for delivery forced on us by government. And just thank you for being able to make it work at this speed so we can deliver. So we're happy to consider those and go forward. Melanie, did you want to comment further? Okay,
No.
Thank you. Approval for all of those schemes has been taken, and the recommendations, all the detail is in the report if there's any further thoughts that you have. Also, can we get approval for the future approvals for schemes allocated to thematic committees as outlined in the report? So this is placing schemes with particular committees. I think everybody's had sight of that. We're all happy with those. Great. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the meeting. I'd like to thank absolutely everybody for coming and attending, and to remind you that the next meeting is October the 22nd, unfortunately 5 days before the spending review, which is frustrating because we'll just have to imagine what Rishi Sunak is going to deliver. But I look forward to seeing you all in October. But now we're going to come off the live stream, and any members of the public or press